at the Delhi High Court. She completed her bachelor's in commerce from Delhi University and went on to do her MBA from Amity. She has co-authored a book on Indian heritage and culture along with Mr. K. Siddharth. Ms. Dalal today will be speaking on the topic of domestic violence and the Domestic Violence Act. This topic has been taken up keeping in mind the current pandemic, which has cooped us all up inside our houses, and how it reminds us that every house may not be, say, a space for everyone, and how it has led to violence in homes where you're not supposed to be, be mm, exposed to such callousness, where you're supposed to be kept a little in your safe space. However, this is not the case, and the cases on domestic violence have been on the rise and have been reported, I think, on an alarming rate. I will now request ma'am to kindly deliver the lecture.
Thank you, Akansha. Very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Nitesh sir. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this topic. And I would also like to thank Yamini and Siddhi and Anjali for helping me come out good in this webinar. And today we are all here, and we are here to discuss the topic on protection of women from domestic violence. And this time cannot be, this cannot be, there cannot be a suitable time, more suitable time than this COVID times, because rightly said by Akansha, during these COVID times, as we are all sitting back at our homes and all are confined in the homes, and we are gradually seeing that there has been a steady increase in the number of domestic violence cases. If I would like to quote National Commission of Women, if we go to their data and the numbers, in the first week of lockdown, say from 23rd of March till 1st of April, there were around 279 complaints received by them for the domestic violence complaints. And what I feel is this is only the tip of the iceberg, because you can see that these type of complaints were received telephonically and through emails only. So you can assess that such type of conversation can be done only by well-educated ladies, or by those ladies who has some sort of helping relatives who can actually guide them to file the complaints in such forums like National Commission of Women. So we see that during these pandemic times, there has been quite a steady increase. So what could be the possible reasons behind that? So it is not that they have just increased, or there have been a rampant increase because of the economic constraint or economic stress which people are facing. It is not that. If we look at the socio-cultural background of our country, then we can actually find out that this has been done since ages. It has been coming from one generation to another, and it is deeply rooted. We see that India is a patriarchal society, and it not only discriminates between a son and a daughter, but we feel that the daughters are highly preferred in our society. And somehow, because of this, the female fetus is also eliminated. We see the problems of female feticide. So these type of problems are already there in our society. So gender discrimination, if we see that when there is a gender discrimination going on right from the time of the birth, then we see that it actually culminates and it further aggravates during the development phase of these children. We feel that there are disparities and there are lack of opportunities for the girl child. Sometimes in the lower strata of the society, and in the rural areas especially, we feel and we have noticed, and we have found that these girls are not even fed properly. What to talk about the education opportunities? They are not even given the proper food as a male child in the house gets that privilege. So we see that this type of practices are already there in the society, and these things are getting reported. They are mainly reported only in the educated families, not from the rural areas. It is very less as compared to that. So coming back to the topic, we all know that such type of cases are reported every day in the newspapers and everywhere. So coming back to the main issue, that is the protection of women from domestic violence, it is not that these type of cases are being reported in India alone. If we look at the numbers during these COVID times, even the worldwide, in almost all the countries, be it developed or the developing nations, there has been an increase in the domestic violence cases. To quote, I would like to quote about UN Chief Antonio Guterres. He had pointed out that violence is not confined to battlefield, and that for women, the threat looms largest where they should be safest, that is in their homes. This he has quoted during the COVID times, that all the developing nations should come forward and they should devise the mechanisms through which the ladies and the girls in the houses should be protected. So even the highest body, the humanitarian or the human organization, has even taken a recognition of the such problem. So coming back to the topic, now we see that I'll just start the PPT. I'll just give me a second. I'll just do it.
So Aditi, you can maximize the screen, I think.
Yes, sir. I'm just doing that. I'm just doing that. Just a second. Now I think it is visible, sir. Is it visible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. So here we are, and
Yeah, Aditi, we all can see. Yeah.
okay, sir. Here it is. If we look at the background of Domestic Violence Act 2005, we see that domestic violence in India. Now here we see that India has adopted the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, both of which ensure that women are given equal rights as men and are not subjected to any kind of discrimination. The Constitution of India also guarantees substantive justice to women. Article 15, as we all know, of the Constitution provides for the prohibition of discrimination against the citizens on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And in Article 15.3, it gives the power to the legislature to make special provisions for women and children. And here we see that in exercise of this power, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act was passed in 2005. You will see, you will ask that before that, didn't we have any provisions? Yes, we were having provisions in terms of Dowry Prohibition Act 1961 we had. Earlier, the provisions were there in terms of 498A that was done in 1983. We had such type of provisions, but this act, particular act of domestic violence, it is more of a comprehensive nature. All the problems, all the issues which a lady can actually experience or a woman can experience during domestic violence, and what type of the safeguards and what type of the help should be facilitated to the lady. All these have been put under one act. So it is more of a comprehensive nature. Here in the next slide, we have, this is about, as we can see, as mentioned earlier, before 1983, there were no specific provisions. pertaining to violence within the home. And husbands could be convicted under the general provisions of murder, abetment to suicide, causing hurt, and wrongful confinement. But none of these provisions take into account the real problem of domestic violence in its totality. Here, this Domestic Violence Act 2005 came into the picture, and all these provisions were inculcated in this particular act. So here we see that all these provisions target only the husband and the in-laws as perpetrators, or else only the violence faced by the daughter-in-law was addressed. So now we move on to Domestic Violence Act. This came in 2005. And if we read the definition of the Domestic Violence Act, we see for the purpose of this act, any act, omission or commission or conduct of the respondent shall constitute domestic violence. It states all the conditions if it harms or injures or endangers the health, safety, life, limb or well-being, whether mental or physical. Here this is important that it is talking about the mental health also and the physical health also of the aggrieved person, or tends to do so, and includes causing physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse, and economic abuse. Here we see that all these 5 types of abuses have been incorporated in this act. Physical abuse we all know, then there is sexual abuse, then there is verbal and emotional abuse. You can very well imagine that in verbal and emotional abuse, it can cause harm much more than a physical abuse, because here it is not visible, but yet it affects the mental peace of the other person. It stresses the other person, and it can also actually aggravate the other person to even go to the extent of committing suicide also. So this has been taken into account. Now in the part B, it says it harasses, it harms, injures, or endangers the aggrieved person with a view to coerce her or any other person related to her to meet any unlawful demand for any dowry or other property. So here, it is not only about the aggrieved person. It is also talking about any other person who is related to the aggrieved person. That can be the relatives of that lady. And if they are also forced to fulfill some demands by the respondent, then also it can be made a part of the domestic violence. So here in C part, we see it has the effect of threatening the aggrieved person or any person related to her by any conduct mentioned in the clause A and B. We have seen that. Or otherwise injures or causes harm, whether physical or mental, to the aggrieved person. So here, for the purpose of this section, we can see that it talks about physical abuse. Physical abuse means any act or conduct. We all know that it is bodily pain, it is a bodily harm, injury, or danger to life, breaking of the limb of the other person, or anything which can actually physically harm the other person, that is the aggrieved person. So here we have sexual abuse. It includes any conduct of sexual nature that abuses, humiliates, degrades, or violates the dignity of women. It has also been taken care of. And then we have the verbal and the emotional abuse, which we just talked about. It includes insults, ridicule, humiliation, name calling, abusing the other person, or insulting the person with regard to not having a child or a male child also. Such type of insults have also been included into this act. And it also talks about the repeated threats to cause physical pain to any person whom the aggrieved person is interested. That means they're talking about any person related to the aggrieved person. Even if that person is threatened in front of that lady, then that is also a part of domestic violence done. And then the most important is the economic abuse. Here it talks about deprivation of all or any economic or financial resources to which the aggrieved person is entitled under law or custom, whether payable under an order of court or otherwise, or which the aggrieved person requires out of necessity. You can very well imagine if a person is not given money or financial help, or the financial needs are not fulfilled, then what type of misery that person is actually feeling, what type of misery he would be living in. So that part has been taken account in this Domestic Violence Act. And it also says that the economic financial resources which the aggrieved person requires out of necessity, including but not limited to household necessities. It says that household necessities have to be fulfilled, and also other than that. That includes Stridhan property, jointly or separately owned by the aggrieved person, payment of rent related to the shared household, and maintenance. So it is taking everything in this economic abuse. And then we have disposal of household effects, any alienation of assets, whether movable or immovable, valuable, shares, securities, bonds, and the like or other property in which the aggrieved person has an interest or is entitled to use by virtue of the domestic relationship, or which may be personally required by the aggrieved person or her children or her stridhan. And then we have in the part C, prohibition or restriction to continued access to resources. Such prohibition, when a lady is, when a woman in the house or the lady is actually prohibited or restricted to use the resources of the house or anything which belongs to the shared household, then that is also a part of the domestic violence. For the purpose, in explanation 2, it has been mentioned that for the purpose of determining whether any act, omission, commission, or conduct of the respondent constitutes domestic violence under this section, the overall facts and circumstances of the case shall be taken into consideration. In totality, all the things which are mentioned in the complaint, everything should be taken into a complete totality. It should not be one thing from here, or it should not be, the complaint should not be lopsided. Proper domestic violence should be established, keeping in view all the facts and the features which have been mentioned in the so-called act. Now, if we move further, we have the definition of aggrieved person. It includes any woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the respondent and who alleges to have been subjected to domestic violence by them. It is in the section 2A of the Protection of Women Domestic Violence Act. Here, it has been noticed that there is a judgment which was passed by Bombay High Court, in which it was said that only aggrieved person can claim maintenance under the DV Act. Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 cannot be simply invoked to claim maintenance when the claimant is not eligible as an aggrieved person within the definition of the act. So aggrieved person here is very important. The person should be in one of those categories. The Justice Bharti H. Dangre observed that it is not every person who can invoke the jurisdiction of the court under the 2005 Act simply for claiming the maintenance, as the purpose of the enactment is to protect the rights of women who are victims of violence of any kind occurring within the family. In this particular case, the complaint was filed by the wife against the husband, and in which there was no domestic violence was experienced by that lady. So the court had given the observation that since there was not even a single act of domestic violence, not even a single incident of domestic violence between the husband and the wife, so she cannot claim a maintenance under the DV Act. So here we see that the aggrieved person should have faced domestic violence in any of the forms which we have earlier discussed. Now moving on to the definition of respondent. It includes, it is very important here, it includes any adult male who has been or is in a domestic relationship with the aggrieved woman, and against whom the woman has sought a relief, or any male or female relative of the husband. So here we see that in respondent, it can be any male or a female relative also of the husband, or a male partner of the married woman, or a woman in a relationship in the nature of marriage. So it is also talking about the other members of the respondent, be it male or female. So here, moving on to the next slide, it talks about the definition of domestic relationship. What is a domestic relationship? The domestic relationship is any relationship between two persons who have lived together in a shared household. And these people can be blood related, that is related by consanguinity. They can be related by the institution of marriage. They can be through a relationship in the nature of marriage, as what we see nowadays in the society. Some people actually prefer to stay in live-in relationships. So the act also takes care of such relationships, and they are protecting the women here who are also in the live-in relationships. It has also been recognized here through this domestic definition of domestic relationship. It also talks about adoption and all the family members living in a joint family. So it is not only about the wife here now. It talks about the mother, other ladies in the house. It talks about your sister, your daughter, anyone. So all the female members in the family, they have been taken care of. Now the definition of child. It is any person below the age of 18 years. And here also, it is more comprehensive definition because it talks about the foster child also, adopted or the stepchild. They all have been taken care of. Now moving on to the next slide. It talks about the other relevant features. Apart from the above definition, the following are the other some important aspects that the Act covers. The right of the victim to get medical facility, to avail free legal services, to get counseling, to get the facility of a shelter home, the duties of a protection officer. All these are there in the other features of the PWDV Act. And here there is counseling, which is mentioned in section 14. It says that the magistrate at any stage of proceedings can direct the respondent or the aggrieved person to go for a counseling, either jointly or singly, and with a service provider. But that service provider should definitely have some experience in counseling and should also be qualified to do such counseling. So counseling as directed by the magistrate should be provided to both the parties. And then we have, moving on to protection officers. So in section 9 of DB Act, the protection officers are there. The protection officer should be appointed by the government in every district. And here it is also mentioned that women protection officers are preferred, who preferably, yes, it is written, who preferably should be women and should be qualified. The duties of the protection officer include filing a domestic incidents report, providing shelter homes, medical facilities, and legal aid for the victims, and ensures that the protection orders issued against the respondents are carried out. This is very important. And it is to ensure that the order under section 20, that is for the maintenance, for the monetary relief, is also complied and executed. That is also the duty of the protection officers. So it is mentioned in the section 9. Then moving on to protection orders, that is section 18, and protection orders for the victim's safety. It is very important here because in domestic violence cases, the perpetrator of the violence and the aggrieved person, they both are under the same roof. So it becomes very important here that the protection orders should be granted. First of all, we should appreciate the fact that most of the times the ladies do not have the courage to file such complaints because of the social pressures. So after, after getting all the courage and after moving on to taking such important step, and if they go to the police stations, the another problem that they face is that they have to stay with that same person in under the safe roof. And if again, when the violence is meted out to the lady, how can she save herself? It might cost her life, or she might be forced to commit suicide. So in these cases, the protection orders are given for the victim's safety and are issued against the respondent, and includes for when he commits violence, aids or abets it, enters any place which the victim frequents. If the victim is not staying with the respondent, and if the person tries to go to his office or attempt wherever she goes on a regular basis, or her parents' house, then also such protection orders can be granted. And attempts to communicate with her, restricts any form of assets of the victim, or causes violence to the people of the interest of the victim, then the protection orders are granted. It is under section 18 of the act. So here, so basically the main purpose behind the section 18 is to protect the victim from further agony, from further violence by the perpetrator. So that has been taken care of. And moving on to the part of residence in section 19. It is here we see that both the parties, the aggrieved and the respondent, they are staying in the same house. They are under the same roof. So the magistrate may choose to restrict the respondent from the place of residence of both the party if they feel that it is for the safety of the victim. If it is under it comes under the observation of the magistrate that she is being she has been subjected to violence at her house, then the magistrate can easily pass such orders that the person won't be staying in that shared accommodation. Or the magistrate can also pass orders where the aggrieved lady can be moved to shelter homes, where she can be safe. And otherwise, she can also be provided any other accommodation for which the rent could be paid out by the respondent. So basically, it is for the safety of the victim. And additionally, the respondent cannot evict the victim from the place of the residence. So to safeguard this can be done. So we have 3 or 4 solutions here for the residents. Either the respondent can be asked to move out from that house. Either some alternative arrangement or accommodation could be made for the victim, or she can be sent to shelter, or some other parallel arrangement can be made. So we have now section 20. It is mainly for the monetary relief. The respondent has to provide relief to the victim to compensate for the loss, including the loss of earnings due to the loss of property by destruction, damage, or removal, and maintenance of the victim and her children. So it is also giving monetary relief, which is very important in such cases, domestic violence cases. And then we have the custody of children in section 21. The custody of the children should be granted to the victim as required, with the visiting rights to the respondent. So we see that the residence, the monetary part, the custody of the children, the safety of the lady, it has all been taken care of in this particular act, which is a very comprehensive act. So now moving on to the procedure. We need to know what is the procedure of filing complaint and what are the court's duty. So the aggrieved person, here the aggrieved person himself, herself, or any other witness of the offense on her behalf can approach a police officer or a protection officer and service provider, or can directly file a complaint with the magistrate for obtaining the order or relief under the act. And here the court is required to take cognizance of the complaint by instituting a hearing within the 3 days of the complaint being filed in the court. The magistrate shall give a notice to the date of hearing to the protection officer to be served on the respondent and such other persons as directed within a maximum period of 2 days. So there is not much of time lag between the receiving of the complaint and the sending of the notice. And also there is a time limitation. Here we see that the court is required to dispose of the case within 60 days of the first hearing. So within a span of 2 months, it is the court is under an obligation to finish off the proceedings. Now the court, to establish the offense by the respondent, can use the sole testimony of the aggrieved person. Here it is very important. Earlier, it was noticed that usually the domestic violence incidents are done in the house. So within the 4 walls of the house, who is going to come and present himself or herself as the witness? Because usually whoever is there in the house, they are all the family members of the respondent, if it is happening in the matrimonial home of the lady. So here, that thing has been taken care of by the legislative body, and they have come to a point that to establish the offense by the respondent, we can use the sole testimony of the aggrieved person. So the problem of getting the witness here, which was a very rare phenomena, has been taken care of. Now, upon finding the complaint genuine, then the court can pass a protection order, which shall remain in force till the aggrieved person applies for discharge. If upon receipt of application from the aggrieved person, the magistrate is satisfied, he may alter, modify, or revoke an order. A complaint can also be filed under section 498A of the IPC, which defines the offense of matrimonial cruelty and prescribes the punishment for the husband of a woman up to 3 years and a fine too. So this was the procedure of filing complaint and the court's duty. Now, moving on to the rights of the aggrieved person, we have already discussed this, but just in a nutshell, we can see that there is the right of the lady to make an application for obtaining a relief by way of protection order. She can very well apply for that. She can order for a monetary relief under section 20. She can go for a custody order, a residence order under section 19, a compensation order, and more than one such order under this act. And she can have the availability of service of the service provider. She can avail the services of protection officers. Yes, she has a right to free legal service under the Legal Services Authority Act. And she has a right to file a complaint under section 498A of the IPC, if it is relevant enough. Then this slide is basically the remedies available. We have already gone through that. The rights of aggrieved under the act, right to reside in the shared household, protection orders. We have all covered that, monetary relief, full custody of children, and the penalty to respondent. Yes, this is also there in the DV Act, where there is a penalty to respondent for not following the orders. And there is a clause which says there is a penalty to protection officer also for not taking action. So basically, all the points which were already not taken care of in the earlier acts, where we could see that there was a problem in filing the complaint, where there was a laxity in following the order or execution of the orders. So that thing has been taken care of by giving penalty to the penalty clauses here for the protection officers and the respondent. So moving on to the most important, one of the most important parts is, what is shared household? We have talked about it in the definition also. What is shared household? So here we see that the scope of this piece of legislation has been expounded in the plethora of judgments by the High Courts and the Supreme Court. It's in the case of S.R. Batra versus Shrimati Taruna Batra, in this case, the Supreme Court, with the reference to the definition of shared household under section 2S of the Domestic Violence Act, stated that the definition of shared household is not very happily worded and appears to be the result of clumsy drafting. And the court held that section 17 of the act, wife is only entitled here it is very important that the wife is only entitled to claim a right of residence in a shared household. And a shared household would mean that the house should be belonging to the respondent, that is the husband, or it should be jointly owned, or it should be in the joint family name where the husband is also a member. This thing is very important because nowadays the cases are coming in the courts where the shared household, in the form of shared households or filing the complaints, even the houses of the in-laws have been also made uh, has also made questionable in these cases. So that thing has been cleared out by the court in this, where the wife is only entitled to claim a right to residence in a shared household, and which would mean the house belonging to or taken or rent by the husband, or the house which belongs to the joint family where the husband is a member. In the case, the property in question neither belong. In this particular case of S.R. Batra versus Srimati Taruna Batra, the property in question was neither belonging to the husband, and nor was it taken on rent, and neither it was a joint family property. And it was the exclusive property of the mother of the husband, and not a shared household. So now this thing actually clears that what is a shared household. It can be only in three cases: either jointly owned by the husband and wife, either jointly it should be in the rent in the name of the husband, or it is in the form of a joint family where husband is a member. So that thing has been cleared. And now if we look at some of the important judgments which further clarifies the issues. This is an important judgment which says that women in live-in relationships are protected under the Domestic Violence Act. The case name is D. Veluswamy versus D. Pattai-Chamal. In this Supreme Court verdict, a wider meaning to an aggrieved person under Section 2A of the Domestic Violence Act was conferred by the Supreme Court, wherein the court enumerated 5 ingredients of a live-in relationship as follows. What all will constitute as live-in relationship? Here we can see they have given 5 ingredients. First is both the parties must behave as husband and wife and are recognized as husband and wife in front of the society. They must be of a valid legal age of marriage. They should qualify to enter into marriage. That, for example, that none of the partners should have a spouse living at the time of entering into the relationship. They must have voluntarily cohabited for a significant period of time, and they must have lived together in a shared household. Here, the Supreme Court observed that not all live-in relationships will amount to a relationship in the nature of marriage to get the benefit of DV Act. To get such benefit, conditions mentioned above shall be fulfilled, and this has to be proved by evidence. The court in this case further stated that if a man has a keep whom he maintains financially and uses mainly for sexual purpose and or a servant, it would not be a relationship in the nature of marriage. So it clearly states what are the 5 ingredients which are required for a live-in relationship to qualify. Now we have estranged wife or live-in partner can claim maintenance under Domestic Violence Act. When you are living in a live-in relationship and that is being recognized in the society, then this maintenance issue is the next to come up. So that has also been addressed by the Supreme Court in the case Lalita Topo versus State of Jharkhand. In this recent case, the Supreme Court has categorically held that maintenance can be claimed under the provision of DV Act, even if the claimant is not a legally wedded wife, and therefore not entitled to claim of maintenance under Section 125 of CRPC. The bench explained that the provisions contained under the Section 3A of the Domestic Violence Act, which defines the term domestic violence, constitutes economic abuse as domestic violence. The court opined that under the provisions of DV Act, the victim, that is the estranged wife or the live-in partner, would be entitled to more relief than what is contemplated under the 125. to a shared household also. So basically this is giving more rights to a live-in partner also. So the ladies who are in a live-in partnership, they can also have a dignified right to claim maintenance, or they can claim a shared household. This has been clarified in these Supreme Court judgments. Now moving on to, against whom can the complaint be filed under the Domestic Violence Act? This particular problem also crops up in number of cases. In the case named Sanjay Wankhede versus Manoj Bhimrao Wankhede, this issue has often remained a controversial one. In Section 2Q of the Domestic Violence Act defines respondent as any adult male person who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the aggrieved person, and against whom the aggrieved person has sought any relief, provided that an aggrieved wife or female living in a relationship in the nature of marriage may also file a complaint against a relative of the husband or a male partner. So that issue has also been cleared, that against whom a complaint can be filed. And it further says that in view of the definition of the term respondent covering adult male person, judiciary has time and again been confronted with the argument that an aggrieved person can file complaint against adult male person only and not against the female relatives of the husband. This is a major point of contention, that how and against whom the complaint can be filed. Is it only against the male members or against the female members also? So here the Supreme Court has clarified it, that yes, it can be filed against the female members also. The Supreme Court in this case has put to rest the issue by holding that Section 2Q does not exclude female relatives of the husband or male partner from the ambit of a complaint that can be made under the DV Act. So the complaint can be filed against the female relatives of the husband also. So moving on to the next. Here, the proceedings under the Domestic Violence Act and Section 125 CRPC are independent proceedings. This is again a major issue, which is observed, that are they independent proceedings, or they are complementary, or they move on side by side. So here we see that in proceedings, in a case titled P. Rajkumar and versus Yoga Lakshmi, the Supreme Court has made following observations. The court says that we are of the considered opinion that the present appeal can be disposed of on a very short point. Admittedly, the respondent was denied any monetary compensation under Section 20 of the Act by the learned magistrate. Once the learned magistrate declined to grant maintenance for the reasons specified, it was not open for him to assume jurisdiction under Section 125, which was not pending before him. The two being independent proceedings, the learned magistrate wrongly assumed jurisdiction under 125 in a proceeding under the Act. In effect, what the magistrate directly declined to the respondent, he granted indirectly by observing that till the proceedings under Section 125 is not decided, the appellant shall pay maintenance at the rate of ₹2,000 per month to the respondent. The order is without jurisdiction and is wholly unjustified and unsustainable. The respondent never challenged the order of learned magistrate declining monetary relief under Section 20 of the Act. Further says in Section 125 CRPC versus DV Act, wife can opt for both the remedies. Supreme Court has upheld the Delhi High Court opinion, but however, it has been mentioned in the judgment that it should be adjusted. The amount which is granted under Section 125 CRPC, it should be adjusted. Here, the Supreme Court has held that passing of an order under Section 125 does not preclude the wife from seeking appropriate relief under the DV Act. A bench of Justice Chandrachud and Justice Banerjee has passed the order in the case titled Nikhil Danani versus Tanya versus, just a second, versus Tanya Danani. Supreme Court states, having heard Ms. Geeta Luthra, the learned senior counsel for the petitioner, and Ms. Vibha Datta Makhija, learned senior counsel for the respondent, the court is of the view that the High Court of Delhi was justified in coming to the conclusion that the mere passing of an order under Section 125 of the CRPC did not preclude the respondent from seeking relief under the DV Act. The Supreme Court then upheld the judgment under appeal, as hence we decline to entertain the special leave petition under Article 136. But it clarified, however, we only clarified that any observations made by the High Court on the merits of the claim of respondent under Section 23 shall not come in the way of appropriate court taking the view on the merits of the matter. So they can go simultaneously. The parties, though married, were living separately. The wife had filed an application under 125 where she was granted interim maintenance of 1.20 lakhs per month. And subsequently, she filed an application under Section 23 of DV Act, seeking monetary relief under Section 20. However, her application was rejected by the trial court that she had already been granted the maintenance under Section 125. And all her claims were considered by the family court while granting the same. The wife here filed an appeal against the order of the trial court, which was allowed, and the appellate court remanded the matter back to the trial court for fresh consideration. Aggrieved, the husband filed the present petition. The senior advocate Geeta Luthra, appearing for the husband, submitted that the appellate court erred in passing the impugned order, as maintenance was already granted to wife. Per contra, it was submitted on behalf of the wife that she suffered domestic violence and was thus entitled to monetary relief. So here we see that the monetary relief under the Domestic Violence Act can be claimed even when under Section 125 of CRPC, the claim has already been taken by the wife. So they are coexisting, they are independent. So here we move on to, now it further says that noting the scope of Section 20 of DV was much wider than the section of Section 125 CRPC, the High Court observed. The High Court says that while Section 125 talks only about the maintenance, Section 20 of the DV Act stipulates payment of monetary relief to meet the expenses incurred and losses suffered as a result of domestic violence, including but not limited to the loss of earning, medical expenses, loss caused due to destruction, damage or removal of any property from the control of aggrieved person. So an order under Section 20 of DV Act is not restricted by an order under Section 125 of CRPC. So it clearly says that they can mutually exist. So moving on to domestic violence, qualification and the capacity to earn cannot be a ground to deny interim maintenance to a wife. This is another question which always, most of the time comes up, where the respondent is of the view that the wife is well qualified and she has full capacity to earn and feed herself. So why she should be paid maintenance? Here, the Delhi High Court has held that the magistrate cannot deny interim maintenance to wife only because she has earning capacity or is a qualified person. A bench of Justice Sachdeva has passed the order in the case titled Binita Das versus Uttam Kumar. A petitioner had filed an application under DV Act, and along with the application, an interim application under Section 23 seeking interim maintenance. Said application rejected by the trial court solely on the ground that the petitioner and respondent are equally qualified and the petitioner was previously employed and has not disclosed any cogent explanation or disability on her part to disable her to earn her living. So the High Court rightly observed that clearly both the trial court as well as the appellate court have erred in not appreciating the judgment of this court, and wherein it has specifically been held that the capacity to earn and actually earning are two different things. One may have a capacity to earn, but is unable to secure a job for herself. or maybe she has a young child whom she has the custody, and if she has to take care of the child and she does not have any other person in the family who can actually give her a helping hand while she's on the job. So in this case, she is well qualified, she has the capacity to work also, but due to certain circumstances she is unable to do, she is unable to get a job. So in this case, you cannot leave her to the mercy of her family or some other well-wishers. It is the duty of the husband. So he has to take care of that lady. So it has been taken care of by the honorable court in the judgment. And there is another point that mere vague allegations that the respondents are family members will not be sufficient to maintain the complaint. This is another issue which comes up where the lady or the aggrieved party, they give the names of all the people, all the relatives of the husband, to basically humiliate them or to basically uh, take the revenge. So here the court has come of the view that mere vague allegation that respondents are family members will not be sufficient to maintain the complaint. In this case, Kamlesh Devi versus Jaypal and others has opined, the bench of Justice Banerjee and Justice Shah has opined that mere vague allegation is not sufficient. The petitioner, here in this case, the petitioner claimed that she and the respondents are the family members of the same family and having been living in the same premises. Husband of the petitioner is retired from the BSF and has 3 daughters. Of those 3 daughters, 2 daughters are unmarried and are going have been going to Krishna Nagar College for their study. Further, respondents have made a gang and are quarrelsome persons. And whenever daughters of petitioner went to their college, the respondent Jaipal, Krishan Kumar, and Sandeep followed them and teased them with obscene activities. So the husband of the petitioner, Sube Singh, also made a complaint to Sarpanch of village god against the respondent. Then in the presence of respectable of the village, the respondents also apologized. It further it further remained normal for some time, but afterwards again started. So hence no alternative, the domestic violence case was filed. The learned judicial magistrate of Narnaul, after discussing the provisions of the act, found that none of the witnesses on record has established any fact to the effect that the respondent and the petitioner have been living in a shared household, and the respondents have caused domestic violence upon them. So the trial court also held that no violence whatsoever has been alleged of any kind within the premises of the shared household. Magistrate dismissed the case. Appeal filed by the petitioner was also dismissed. Even the High Court did not come to the rescue. The petitioner approached Supreme Court, and which also declined to give any relief and gave an observation that the High Court was rightly found in effect that the ingredients of domestic violence are wholly absent in this case. So basically, what are the prerequisites of filing a domestic violence case should be fulfilled before a case is filed. Here, the petitioner and the respondents are not persons living together in a shared household. There is a vague allegation that the respondents are family members. There is not a whisper of the respondents with the petitioner, and they appear to be neighbors. So the special leave petition is dismissed. So, and this is also one of the most important issues. Wife living separately cannot file case against the parents-in-law. Madhya Pradesh High Court has held that if the wife and the husband have the shared household to establish their own household, the domestic relationship comes to end in respect of parents if they have moved out of the shared house of their parents, and therefore complaint under the DV Act cannot be maintained against them. A bench of Justice Avasthi has passed the order in the case titled Kuldeep Singh versus Rekha. After the marriage, the wife came to her matrimonial house in Gwalior and resided with the family members of her husband. It is stated that in the year 2011, her husband got a job at Treasure Island, Indore, and in the year 2012, her husband shifted to Delhi. and they started living there. When they were living at Indore and Delhi, the applicant number 2 and 3 came there and demanded 22 lakhs and harassed her. It is alleged that applicant number 2 and 3 used to visit at Indore and Delhi, and they reiterated the respondent number 1 with regard to dowry. Wife filed a complaint under the DV Act against several persons, including her husband and his mother and father. When the matter reached the High Court, it observed the aforesaid documents clearly established that after some time of the marriage, the respondent number 1 and her husband moved out joint family and established their own households at Indore and Delhi. It further observed that in this regard, the provision of Domestic Violence Act is to be taken into account. Under Domestic Violence Act, the first precondition is that the applicant must be an aggrieved person, is a person defined in 2A, which is already there in the definition. The domestic relationship must be there between the aggrieved person and the respondent to invoke Domestic Violence Act. So finally, the High Court quashed the case against the parents-in-law by saying, this court has carefully gone through the complaint preferred under the section 12 of the DV Act, and in the considered opinion of this court, that in the present case, after some time of the marriage, the respondent, gone with the husband, leaves the shared household to establish their own household at Indore and Delhi. And as a result, the domestic relationship comes to an end. Therefore, proceedings based upon the complaint initiated in the matter pending before the judicial magistrate Indore is not maintainable against the applicant number 2 to 8 and deserves to be quashed. So these were the judgments which clarify on different tricky issues, or what you call the main contentious issues. So that has been taken care of in all these judgments. And now moving on to the conclusion, we see that indeed this piece of legislation is very comprehensive, and it has taken account of all the custody related issues, monetary issues, and it has very well defined the aggrieved persons, the respondent, and almost all this. So it is basically a comprehensive law, and it addresses all the issues related to the women. And it is for the first time that an act has been made to address the women issues in such detail. And it is an extremely progressive act because it recognizes the women who are in a relationship also. It is going at par with the changes in the society. As the society is progressing, all such changes has been tried to be incorporated in this act. So it is indeed a progressive act. And all the issues, like it is not only talking about the lady or the wife, it is also talking about all other female relatives also. It is talking about the daughter, it is talking about the mothers, it is talking about the sisters. So it is quite comprehensive. And it has given, act has given a new dimension to the word abuse. This is very important because earlier when we were talking about the physical abuse only, this act is way ahead, and it is talking about not only talking about the physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse. It is also talking about economic abuse, which was earlier not addressed as such. So it is also talking about inclusion of economic violence, and it is very forward thinking and important part of this definition. So so this is the conclusion, and I think we have taken a lot of time. 1 hour is already there, and yes, I think and I'll just.
Yes, Aditi.
Yes, sir. Should I straight away move to the questions?
Yeah, if you are having time for the questions, I think then we can go.
Okay, sir. Then I think I should close the PPT and then move on to the question part.
Right, right.
Okay, sir. I'll just do that.
Ma'am, you let me know when to start. So
Yeah,
I'll-
just a second. I'll just. Yes, yeah, tell me.
So, ma'am, I've received a couple of questions. If we have enough time, we can take them up all. So,
Yes,
how,
we can take one or two of them, and rest I can reply by mail.
yeah, we can request them because it's already 6:05.
Yes,
So we
that's
can
a
ask the to mail us the questions and we can forward them to you.
yeah,
So,
sure.
ma'am, the very first question that has come up is by Advocate Shobit Mahant. Ma'am, he asks that can the brother file a domestic violence complaint online on behalf of his sister?
Yes, yes, the brother can file. Yes,
Okay, ma'am, thank
because
you.
he is related to that lady. Because it is already mentioned in the DV Act that any person who is related to the aggrieved person can also file a complaint on her behalf. So yes, it can be filed.
So, ma'am, the second question being, if the wife is earning more than the husband and living separately with kids, can she file a domestic violence case for maintenance also, asking for maintenance?
If she is earning more than husband, yes, she can file a case. But I think it depends upon the court and the judge that how is going to take care of it, because she can definitely claim maintenance for the child.
Right.
So because the child is the responsibility of both the parents.
Right.
So the husband can contribute, yes, and he should be.
Ma'am, coming on the next question, it's by Mr. Ankit. He asked that exposure of domestic violence can place children on a very risk for a variety of emotional, social, and behavioral problems. Is there any counseling available under this act for children or for the parents who go through this situation?
Yes, the counseling is available in this. I have mentioned the counseling provision of counseling is there in the DV Act, where the protection officers or sometimes the service providers, basically they are given the job of giving counseling. It is sometimes done individually, and other times it can be done jointly. And these people are basically qualified and professionals in giving the counseling to both the parties.
So, ma'am, can you please elaborate more कि counseling की कौन सी stage पर होती है? Because I think as a normal practice, this the CAWCL initial level पे करता है. So once the case is there in the court, तब counseling का provision है क्या लोगों के पास?
Yes, it is there. It is there. It can be done initially on the orders of the magistrate. The counseling can be asked in the initial complaint stage also, and later on also, if both the parties feel that a counseling can somehow resolve the matter, and if the judges of the view that the issues can be sorted out, then counseling can be done.
Ma'am, a very interesting question has come across by Mr. Ankit himself. He asks that now that Section 377 has been decriminalized and is legal in India, so will this apply to the same-sex couples as well, the DV Act?
Yes, it has been decriminalized, but I'm really not sure about this issue. If that would be okay, that I do the proper research and get back to you through a mail.
Yeah, because even we haven't come across any precedent like this.
Exactly.
Because even they share the domestic relationship like we define in the DV Act, but no such precedent has been laid down. So I found this a very...
This is very interesting question. This is very interesting question, and this should be.
Yeah, so Siddhi, this is a majestic question rather. Someone who has taken this question is rather majestic.
I would
And the
definitely
person,
find out the answer.
Sir, I read this myself
Yeah,
and I
Ankit,
was
kindly.
able to ask myself. I was like, no, I have to ask.
This is
So,
a very relevant question.
moving on to next question, ma'am. It's by Priyanka. She asked that what can be done if after complaining, the woman is made to take back the complaint under pressure.
Under the pressure of the respondent or his family members.
Family with the respondent collectively, she's not precise in her question, but I think what she means is this only.
So here, I think the lady's family should be more supportive towards the aggrieved person, because see, that pressure can always be generated by the family if they are in a shared household and if they are staying together. But if the parents are on the side of that girl, and if she is confident enough, then yes, such type of practices can be stopped.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, just one last question, and rest I would request all the participants to please mail us the question and we may proceed. We'll forward them to Aditi ma'am and she can respond to us over mail.
Definitely.
So,
Aditi,
ma'am,
Can I ask you a question?
Aditi,
Yes,
if you
sir?
can please, give your email ID, and so that the participants and the viewers may write it down, because we have already gone across the time.
I'll just do that, sir.
Yeah, just write it
ma'am,
down
can
on
I
the
please
chat
ask?
box. Yes, Siddhi, over to you.
Yes, sir. I'll just take up the last question. It's by Shobit sir only. He asked that can the women file an execution petition for the enforcement of the maintained order passed by the court against the husband under the Act of the DV Act?
Just a second. I'll just.
Sir, can I ask one question?
I have sent my email ID. It's there.
Yes, Shobit, you can ask, but I think the questions which you have posted, Siddhi is taking up those questions only.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Aditi ma'am, the last question was by Shobit sir himself. He had asked that can the women file an execution petition after she's obtained the maintenance order for the under the DV Act? So is there a
Yes.
provision to file execution of that order?
Yes, you can definitely file for the execution, because sometimes it has been observed, most of the times it has been observed that when the maintenance order has been given, but the other party or the respondent, they are very reluctant to part with the money. So yes, execution orders can be filed.
And there's one question, it's a little bit vague, and I would want, because it is related to the previous question, it is a little bit vague in language, so I might just reframe it. It asks that DV, domestic violence, is a criminal procedure altogether. So many people have confusion that whether the CPC will apply, like execution comes under Order 21. So execution will apply, will the provisions of CPC, which are general in nature, will apply in the proceedings of a domestic violence case?
I didn't get you. Can you just come again?
Ma'am, like what I mean is domestic violence is a criminal proceeding that goes on, right? It's a criminal case. So provisions like, for example, execution that was taken up at the moment come under Order 21 in the CPC. So that being a civil procedure, can a civil procedure having general provisions be implemented in a criminal case such as the domestic violence?
I think, Nitesh sir, can you guide us on this? I think it can be done, and it is always, most of the times it is done, because execution is filed in the, whenever we get a maintenance order, the executions are usually filed in most of the cases.
Nitesh sir, would you like to elaborate on this topic? Nitesh sir, are you there? I
Nitesh
think,
sir?
no. His video has been paused. I think there's some technical error with him.
Sure.
Yeah. Never mind. I think, ma'am, you
Sir,
made
ma'am, can I ask one question, two questions?
Shobit sir, are those the questions separate from what you texted me?
Or you can separately email it to me. I can get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
ma'am.
I will definitely get back to you.
Because it's already 6:15 and we've taken much of your time. So I would like to conclude this.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time. And I will hand it over to Yamini ma'am. She'll conclude it to you. Yamini ma'am, over to you.
Yeah, thank
It was
you.
a different question.
Thank you, Aditi ma'am. You can email, sir. Yeah, thank you, Aditi ma'am, to speak on such a vast topic of Domestic Violence Act and giving us your valuable time. And we are lucky to have you on board today. As we know, today's webinar was very informative, and yes, the choice of PPT was articulative. Not only this, ma'am, but providing such output and law was of immense knowledge, and I believe that eyes of many would get open on this subject. Last but not the least, I want to thank all our viewers who are with us today. And yes, ma'am, we would like to have you more on such law subjects in future also. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nitesh sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Entire team.
Thank you, Nitesh sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
thank you.
ma'am.
Thanks a lot, Aditi, for the broadened PPT representation.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you
were
so much.
you were supposed to say something more, Yamini, or I have taken up your time.
No, sir, I am done. Maybe
Okay,
some
okay.
technical
Thank you,
glitch was
Nitesh
there.
sir.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Nitesh
Nitesh
sir,
sir.
for
Thank you, ma'am.
organizing this webinar too.
This ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you, all of you.
maybe there is a possibility. Thank you, Obed. Thank you, Aditi. Thank you, Siddhi, Yamini, and again Akansha, who started and introduced our speaker. And Aditi, thanks a lot for coming here on our board and speaking on this Domestic Violence Act 2005. Thank you so much for today's
My
webinar.
pleasure, sir. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shobit.